Hello, I'm Chris.
Hello, I'm Charlie.
I'm your dad.
And I'm your son.
And we both love sports.
And sports betting.
And sports betting. And here we are again after another 2 weeks absence. we were hiding because our tips did so badly, Charlie.
We're sort of doing this thing where we promised once a week and now we've gone once a fortnight. So you know that if we come back again next week, our tips have done well.
I blame the international break. Just when you got some momentum, a 3-game momentum at the beginning of the Premier League season, they pull an international break, and I think it's sort of no one wants that, do they?
No, I think that was evident as Brighton fans. Of course, we had a really good win over Manchester City, and then which was our first win of the season, and then to have that break obviously kills a bit of momentum. You know, you put it perfectly, but we did see the return of the NFL in the meantime, so maybe that's something I think we can explore today, looking to maybe build some profit on a sport we haven't covered yet on this.
No, well, we haven't covered because we started this back in the summer, end of the Premier League season. Just in case you haven't seen this before, the objective is that we try and double our money each week, wagering bets of small sums up to £100 maximum, which we very rarely hit. And we were doing very well over the summer on a mix of sports. We just a bit of tricky start to the Premier League season. It's tough to predict some of the games. And this week's schedule, I think, has game week 4, I guess this would be in American terms. So it's slightly difficult to pick the form on this. I don't know if you want to start football or US American football. Where are we going on this?
Definitely. I think we start over here in the UK. As you say, it's a tough old slate to look through. You know, a lot of kind of, I'd say, competitive games, you know, which often is, as a neutral or someone watching the game, is always enjoyable. But from a betting standpoint, can be tough, you know. Looking at fixtures like one involving Bournemouth and Brighton, you've got Everton, Aston Villa, Newcastle, Wolves, you know, Brentford, Chelsea. I mean, even the big boys. I think, you know, we've seen that they've struggled early on. You know, Tottenham had such a good start to the season, and they lose at home to Bournemouth. We've seen, you know, Manchester City have had a very slow start to the season, losing twice. Manchester United being Manchester United, of course, and have started poorly. So I think the further it goes on, obviously we get more data, we get more kind of idea of how teams play, where players are playing in those teams. So fingers crossed, you know, we get better as the season goes on. And I think it makes sense, you know, to start this weekend in the Premier League. I'm happy to kick us off with a couple of bets. I've got a slightly different approach, I think, which is as a result of maybe our I don't want to say aggressive kind of approach to betting in the early weeks, but perhaps more longer odds. I've gone with a kind of shorter odds play for the first one. And it's a 3-leg even money bet. And I'm making the most of a market here called the double chance market. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but essentially there are of course 3 outcomes in a football game in terms of results, you know, home team, away team, or the draw. And this bet essentially covers 2/3 of those results. So it's called the double chance because you're obviously doubling your chance of getting a winner. And I thought that was quite quaint for the Double Your Money podcast.
So you're backing one team to win or draw, basically?
Exactly. So basically just not to lose the game. And those 3 teams this weekend, I've got Fulham at home to Leeds. I've got Crystal Palace at home to Sunderland. And I've actually gone Bournemouth at home to Brighton. I think in my head, you know, Palace, Fulham, obviously established Premier League clubs facing newly promoted sides. Fulham have had a pretty good start. I thought they were very unlucky away at Chelsea last time out. Crystal Palace, obviously, they lost Everett Chiese, but had a great win at Aston Villa before the international break. Managed to keep hold of Mark Gahey against a Sunderland team who look like they're going to be very good at home, but might struggle on the road this season. And then Bournemouth against Brighton. Of course, I think that's always a tricky thing to bet against your team, but of course, I'm not fully betting against Brighton this weekend. I think as a Brighton fan, a draw would be a very good result. But in my head, I think Bournemouth have started very well this season. They ran Liverpool very close on the opening night. They got a great result away at Tottenham, and they picked up a home win against Brentford. So, 2 out of 3 wins could have easily been unbeaten by now. Facing a Brighton team, I think you would say haven't looked sort of the finished product just yet. So 3 teams basically not to lose this weekend. And that 3-leg parlay, 3-leg accumulator is coming in at double your money price. I'd like £10 on that to return £20. I think that's a nice, simple, easy play for Bet One this week to get us back on track. And obviously, hopefully, that Brighton Bournemouth game ended a draw, because I think I'd be happy with that in both cases. I'm not sure your thoughts on that bet.
So does that, just on the odds for a second, does that mean that's in evens money bet, is it?
Even money, yeah, spot on.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, one of the things I think we like to do on this is sort of share some of our insight into sports, in this case football, but also into how the gambling market, or sports betting market, I should say, works. And given it's the first time, what's this category? A double chance, is it? Is that
double chance is what it's called? Yes.
And so the odds on that, because you're backing 2 outcomes out of a possible 3, the odds are going to be shorter, aren't they?
Exactly, yeah. But by the same token, if you had a massive underdog in a football match, take kind of an FA Cup 3rd round tie, the team who are the underdogs, their double chance price is often fairly nice to take in the outcome that they might sneak a draw. You don't need them to win outright. So in this case, they're very short odds individually as legs. But this is a great kind of case in point where if you combine those legs together, you can actually get into a price that looks worth following, and something that's worth betting on.
Okay, and double chance obviously lends itself to football, soccer, or whatever we're calling this, just distinguishing the American football on this week's recording, because there are a lot of draws, a lot of ties in football. Exactly,
and it's crazy you say there are a lot of draws in football. I don't think it's the most common result in football. I think that's a 2-1 win. But it seems like, how often do you hear of 0-0s or 1-1s, throughout the football league and throughout the world, really. So, and I think often betting on the draw as a straight sort of bet is a very risky one, and you're rewarded with quite generous odds, but no one really likes betting on the draw, I think, from a sort of fan's point of view. And I certainly never back the draw because you want to see a winner. I know that sounds very American of me, but I think this is a great market to make the most of.
I'm going to jump in because one of my 2 bets this week is a 3-way triple draw forecast.
Wow.
No, it's a good time for me to say this, because this makes your point, or endorses it, because the odds I got for this are very long, because it's quite difficult. So we're obviously of the same thinking, because I picked Bournemouth Brighton as one of those 3 matches, because I think there's a very high chance that will be a draw. I also think Everton Villa will be a draw, because I think Everton's still basking in the glow of the new stadium. Villa not off to a great start, and I think a point apiece there. And I think West Ham will hold Spurs to a draw, because they're coming off the back of a decent result. And those London derbies, they tend to be tight affairs. And just to make your point, you had a 3-way double chance, which was at evens money. That what do you think the odds are on that 3-leg draw forecast?
I'd like at least 15 or 16 to 1.
That is 42 to 1.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And I think that's justified. The fact that, out of a 9 possible results there, you need 3 exactly, and for my one, out of 9 results, I've got 60% chance of those results coming in, So it's a high risk, high reward. Obviously, I think the reasoning, the rationale behind it is perfect. My perhaps caveat or flag I'd raise on that one, I think Everton might win at home again.
Do you? Okay. I think at some stage Villa got to come good, and I'm not sure Everton are quite as good as their results are suggested. But and also obviously Grealish up against his boyhood club, and there's some points of interest there, isn't there? Well, why don't let's do the tenner on your sensible bet, And let's do £2.50 on my slightly implausible longer odds bets, and let's see where we go. Anyway, I don't want to get too bogged down in the market.
I will also say, as Brighton fans, regardless of the podcast that we're filming, a Brighton win kills both of those bets. So I don't know if we're going to be smiling one way or the other, perhaps.
Yeah, but you know that a Brighton win trumps everything anyway. So
that's true. That's very true.
All bets are cancelled, isn't it? Well, okay. Well, that's interesting. All right. Let's, in the interest of time, let's crack on. Have you got anything else in that's English football or Premier League facing?
For sure, and I mentioned it in our last episode how betting on your own team can be a good thing if you use it correctly. And I think instead of loading up on your team to win or picking your favourite player to score, if you use some kind of you watch a lot of the games, the sort of patterns of play. So I've gone for a little two-leg bet builder in the Brighton-Bournemouth game.
Okay,
it's two players for a shot on target, one from each team. And I've gone from Jorginho Ruta from Brighton and Antoine Semenyo from Bournemouth. I think he's a great player, Semenyo. Little bit surprised he didn't get a move in the summer, like much of the Bournemouth team did. He's probably their most dominant attacking threat. He's strong, he's powerful, he's quick, can run with the ball very well. Has had a shot on target in every game this season so far. And Jorginho Ruta, I think he's probably my favourite Brighton player to watch, at the moment. He plays with flair, he's got a great touch, and he's playing a bit more in that advanced kind of almost false nine role this season, as we've seen in the couple of games we've had already for Brighton. And that was quite a nice price. It was just above W money, even money bet. It was 5-4, the odds on both of those guys for a shot on target. And I think naturally that game, two teams that are going to be competing for Europe this season, going to be attacking, should be a lot of end-to-end action. Both games last year were cracking games. We won 2-0 at Bournemouth last year, and we won 2-1 at home, and that game specifically was very end-to-end. It felt like either team could have won it. So I think two players with an eye for goal and will have plenty of opportunities for shots. I'm banking they can get one on target each. And I'll say another £10 on that.
Another £10. Okay.
Nice.
I think Semenyo scored their goal, didn't he, in that 2-1 game?
That was.
It was Evan. It was the Kluivert, was it?
Kluivert was an absolute belter as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Cracking goal. Good game, really good game. So hopefully more of the same this weekend. But I think again that's quite a nice price.
Okay, good. We'll go for that. £10 at 5-4. Just rattling on, just using insight here again, and this is once again there's a sort of Brighton link here. My second Premier League bet is on the Chelsea game. They are away at Brentford, and what I've gone for there is I've gone for a João Pedro score or assist and a João Pedro yellow card, and that's based on the fact that the last game he played for Brighton was away at Brentford, where he got sent off. Do you remember?
I was there that day. Unfortunately, you weren't with me to endure that terror.
I wasn't there. I had been.
We lost 4-2 as well.
We lost that game. He got sent a rush of blows, and I think in his mind, and the thing that we sort of loved and hated about João Pedro, he's a good player and he scored a lot of goals for us, albeit a lot of them penalties. But he was a bit of a loon, a bit of an idiot, prone to the sort of rush of blood. So I could very much see him scoring or assisting, because I think Chelsea will get the result there, good though Brentford have been. And I think he's probably in the back of his mind, he'll want a bit of own back, and he's a bit of a loon. So I think he's good for a yellow card. And there's 15-2 odds on that, which I thought were decent for a two-leg outcome.
Very nice. I'd also say that market of betting on a player to score and to get a yellow card is quite popular for those players. If you picture 1-1, 90th minute, Pedro scores, he's either jumping into the crowd or he might take his shirt off. So that's always something to look at. I think for those guys that like a live bet or an in-play bet, if the game is close and you've got a player like, I'm thinking João Pedro or Richarlison, those kind of guys that are going to take their shirt off and make it all about them for the big celebrations. If there's a late winner, you could often get some pretty nice prices, as you've shown, almost 8-1 there. So I'm very happy rolling with that.
Okay, £5 on that, I think, and so yeah, it's worth thinking about the players that have the flamboyant celebrations. I wonder if the sports books and the bookies reflect that in their odds. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, wouldn't it? Probably not. I wouldn't have thought. But okay, I did have another football one, but I wonder if two each on the football. I had a four-way plus 2.5 goals, which, if you agree with it, we might stick it on. If not, because I think 2.5 goals are probably good in the Arsenal Forest game, Newcastle Wolves, Brentford Chelsea, and Burnley Liverpool.
I really like the last three. I think that the tough thing with the Arsenal Forest game, we just don't know what Ange is going to be like for Forest. If we're basing that off how kind of historically he's been with Spurs, and they leaked goals last season. I like that as a player. I just think defensively they're both fairly strong. What odds are you getting on the 4-leg?
7-1.
11 or 7?
7.
I think that's pretty strong. That's reflected in the odds. 2.5. Like I say, love the other games for goals. I think plenty of attacking options. I think Liverpool could stick 5 past Burnley on Sunday themselves. So yeah. I'm happy taking it. Of course, that Arsenal game is the first game in that.
30,
yeah, which is sometimes I think it is a cautious lesson to be learned, that if your bet doesn't get past the first game. But I'm happy rolling with a £5 wager to get us back £40. I think that's nice.
Okay, we'll do that. I mean, just a footnote on that, because 2 weeks ago when we did some Premier League tips, I came unstuck, didn't I, on at least one or two of my tips, because I'd gone specific players, and when it came to team and squad lineups, one of them wasn't in the starting 11, and the other one didn't even make the matchday squad. And you were saying on the way to the game that it was a sort of lesson in not backing players too early.
For sure. I think don't back them unless you know. Yeah, I think João Pedro is a great example where Liam Delap is out injured. He is Chelsea's number 9. He's going to play. There's no sort of selection issues around that. I think similar to my Ruta and Semenyo. Semenyo is Bournemouth's best player. Jorginho Ruta made a little cameo back. He's trained all week. I'd be reluctant to go and bet on someone Forest related this weekend, because you don't know if Andrew's going to come in and mix things up. He might change things. So always keep an eye, an ear to the ground for injury news. I know Pep Guardiola. I think that was the actual example that Foden wasn't in the squad.
No, that's right. I had Foden, didn't I? That's right.
Last week. And Pep Guardiola, he's got a bit of a kind of reputation for Pep roulette, they call it, in the world of fantasy football players. About rotating teams. So it's always a good one to look out for lineups and any injury news the day of or day before a game.
Sorry, got distracted there because the dog farted. Love him, but
maybe he's not a fan of the over 2.5 goals parlay.
No, he's not. Okay, let's talk about the NFL, because the NFL's back, and it's interesting because week 1 has played out, and that was difficult to predict as well, wasn't it? I know you had in your personal interest, you had a dabble, didn't you? How was it for you?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was very entertaining, but I think perhaps for the wrong betting reasons. Obviously my day-to-day involves a lot of American sports, and the NFL is obviously king of the US sports, much like the Premier League is the biggest in the UK. And we saw a couple of upsets, teams not kind of playing the way we kind of expected them to. We saw big name players not playing as well as they should have done. But again, the beauty of the NFL is there's another week straight away, so much data from week 1. And I think really you're not kind of getting rounded out and settled into your teams until about the 4th or 5th week. So I've got a couple of more conservative plays, I think, this weekend.
Okay.
I think what we've learned from this podcast is perhaps to bet on the kind of secure or more reliable teams and players that seem to have treated us well. So I've taken a similar approach for the NFL this weekend.
Okay, just before you dive into that, have you seen the film Ghost?
I haven't.
All right, okay. It's a Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, Whoopi Goldberg film, and in it, spoiler alert, in it he dies, he gets murdered, and he appears as a vision at various points during the film. And when he appears, there's a sort of celestial light that appears in the sky, and it looks very much like you're getting a visitation from Patrick Swayze over your right shoulder. So let's hope it's the betting gods who are paying a visit. Sorry, Charles. Okay, so back to business. What's grabbed your eye in this week's NFL schedule?
That's all right. So we'll start with game one tonight. The NFL always kicks off with a Thursday night game. Thursday night football, they called it. Very simple. And tonight's game features two playoff teams from last season: the Washington Commanders and the Green Bay Packers. Now, the Green Bay Packers had a great week one, beating the Detroit Lions at home. They only allowed 13 points all game. They managed to stop the run. The Lions couldn't do anything. They pressured the quarterback, record number of times. And they're at home tonight at Lambeau Field, which is a pretty iconic US, American football stadium. I'll sort of compare it to your Anfield or Old Trafford. And those fans, they love their football. They're facing the Commanders, who, again, like I said, made the playoffs last season, have a quarterback who's in his second year, very talented player called Jaden Daniels. And they've brought in a couple of, let's say, kind of veteran players, to kind of bolster their roster. They had a good week one win over the New York Giants, who are probably, in the bottom 5 teams in the NFL. So I'll take that win with a pinch of salt. So I've got a two-leg play for this game tonight, coming in at 11 to 10, so just above even money. And that is Green Bay Packers to win and Josh Jacobs to score a touchdown. Now, Josh Jacobs is the Green Bay Packers running back. He's a bit of a bell cow. He gets a lot of the carries. He ran the ball 19 times last week. He scored last week. He's actually scored 10 games in a row as well. So there's very strong underlying data there. Back at home. And I think if the Green Bay Packers win, he's absolutely scoring a touchdown. So I think that's a good one to take. Okay.
And that's slightly over evens money, which seems generous actually for I guess it's contingent on the Packers winning at home.
Exactly, yeah. But like I said, Packers, they're favorited tonight. So bolstering up with the touchdown from their lead running back is a safe play, I think. And that's a kind of good point to touch on there. I think that a lot of people ask, what are the betting markets in American football? The touchdown market is sort of the equivalent to the anytime goal scorer market in soccer. A little bit more kind of generously priced, I'd say. With certain players, but then it goes to the flip side. If you're betting on the lead kind of running back in the team, you may be getting just under even money price, if not a little bit lower, on some of the really good guys. But Josh Jacobs, top 10 running back in the league, Green Bay Packers, I think they're a sneaky shout for the Super Bowl this year. I think they'll be very good.
Generally speaking, I mean, if any Americans are watching this, I think I'm an idiot for saying this. Generally speaking, in American football, you're backing 3 player positions. Speaking, aren't you? You're backing the running backs, you're backing the quarterback, and the wide receivers, because most of the sort of offensive, the attacking odds revolve around, passing completion and attempts for the quarterback, touchdown passes, rushing yards for the backs, running backs, and then receptions. Touchdowns, obviously, for all 3 of those. So that's the main focus, isn't it?
Yeah, and everyone likes to bet on offense. There are defensive stuff available. As you say, the main and most popular types of bets are on quarterbacks, running backs, receivers. I noticed you missed out tight ends, so let's give them some love.
I was trying not to get too technical about it, because technically, they block, but they also catch, and
they do. Yeah,
tight ends never run. I mean, they never run with the ball, do they? They can only.
They never run the ball, or very rarely. Yeah, you're never really going to see that. But yeah, I think that's a nice bet to start us off in the NFL this season. As I said, that's the first game of the week. Thursday night football should be a cracker.
Okay, good.
And then I'll take us into, I think, as we touched on the touchdown market, I'll take us to a 3-leg touchdown scorer play. This is for Sunday's games. 2 of them's kicking off at 6 p.m. UK. One of them kicking off at 9:30. I've gone for Derrick Henry of the Baltimore Ravens, Saquon Barkley of the Philadelphia Eagles, and then Kyron Williams of the LA Rams. Now, these three fantastic running backs, Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley, alone, they led the league last year in rushing yards. And their teams, Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl last year. The Baltimore Ravens got to the sort of semi-final equivalent last year. They're cracking teams. They'll have a lot of chances to score. They're their league guys. And then Kyron Williams plays for the Rams. In my opinion, is one of the most underrated running backs in the NFL. The Rams have a very strong offense with Puka Nacua, wide receiver, Devontae Adams, and Matthew Stafford at quarterback. They put up a lot of points. All three of these guys scored in week one, and I'm backing them all three again to score this weekend. And you're getting a pretty nice price of 3-1 on all three of those to score. I'd quite like £10 on that to return a nice £40.
Okay, what are we putting on the Green Bay Washington two-legger?
I think let's stick with the £10 again this week.
£10 for that one, okay.
We've had a couple of down weeks, so it makes sense to balance the books a bit and build it up again. Okay,
just for people who don't know, you look at you crunch quite a lot of data around the NFL and American football, repeatable patterns. It sort of lends itself to that, doesn't it? What have you based this on, the fact that you like these three players, or is there some element of the opposition that these guys are playing against on the weekend?
There is, yeah. I think that's always good to come into it. You mentioned the opposition. Saquon Barkley of the Eagles is playing against the Kansas City Chiefs this weekend. So a very good team, but they lost in week one. I think with the NFL, it's really important when you're betting on stuff like passing yards and rushing yards and receiving yards to look at the opponent a little bit more. With touchdowns, obviously it's just as important, but I think especially with running back touchdowns, you're thinking how many points is a team going to score that weekend? Are they going to win? Who are the points going to come from? In soccer terms, we're sort of betting on, all right, Erling Haaland and Mo Salah in the NFL. So if Liverpool or Man City win, those guys are likely involved. I think that's even more so here. And we've seen with Derrick Henry and Kyron Williams, they're facing the Cleveland Browns, who lost last week, and the Tennessee Titans, who lost last week. Both, again, bottom 10 defenses in the NFL. So it does bear in mind, and that comes into the odds as well, that they're a little less generous when A, they're a good player, and B, they've got a good matchup.
And if someone from the UK who likes a bit of sort of sports betting but wants more generous odds than the Americans typically do, for example, and think 11-10 for a two-legger or 3-1 for a three-legger aren't very generous, what aspects of the game should you look at if you're looking for longer odds? Is it just to multiply the number of legs? Is it to turn 3 touchdown scorers into 5, or are there other sort of facets of play where the odds are maybe more generous but obviously trickier to predict?
I think often you see with player props, is what the terminology is called, where you're betting on how many yards or how many receptions a player is going to have. That's where you can really boost up the odds. Of course, with touchdowns, scoring 2 or 3 touchdowns in a game for a single player is tough, but you could combine 10 touchdown scorers together. Again, bigger odds, bigger chance of risk. I think that to try and get a little bit more bang for your buck, you're looking at taking a player for maybe 100 receiving yards or 100 rushing yards in a single game, especially when, as we mentioned, they've got a great matchup. The other team struggles to defend that position. They put up statistically bad numbers. Coming up against a good player who can exploit that, I think then you're looking at maybe punching up some numbers of rushing yards, of receptions, or passing yards, as I said, can generally get you some decent odds. And like you say, a bit more return on your investment.
Okay, a couple of caveats with the American football, which compared to our football, is that injury is a big unknown, isn't it? Particularly in my experience around wide receivers for some reason, because often they're having to run through traffic. They're in the air catching the ball. They take, I'm not suggesting people don't take hits on the line, they do, but there's something about those wide receivers. They're slighter builds maybe, And I always go back to, a big bet I had, you might have been on it, which was Tyreek Hill, wasn't it, last season or season before, where they got injured. And unlike football, this is the reason I say it, is that most of the British sports books, if a player is injured or subbed off, whoever comes on to play them, they sort of take over the bet, don't they? Sub in play, I think they call it. Do they? Is it?
They do, yeah. And of course, there's no substitutions in the NFL. They've always got someone else that's already playing, essentially. And you mentioned the sort of fragility of players, but the sheer force of the hits that are delivered and the speed at which they're running lends itself to more injuries, of course. So then that's always a really tough one, because I think that's not necessarily you're losing because it was a bad bet. You're just getting unlucky there. So that comes with betting on the NFL, because it's a more physical game, full contact. You're looking at head-to-head collisions. It lends itself to injuries.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that American sport, I think, can be frustrating, this is more of an NBA thing, I think, is that notion that if a team is well up in the game, the coaches are inclined to rest their best players. So you might be looking for 5 extra yards from your running back to hit the total, and suddenly the coach thinks, right, that's it. And then they send in the second string, and your bet's left dangling a bit. But anyway, it's just me.
For sure. I think that's another point to make is then look for those games where you think it's going to be close. The sportsbooks outline that with spread betting, which we've covered in the past. You don't want, for example, that Baltimore Ravens Cleveland Browns spread is set at 12.5 points. So that's almost 2 touchdowns. There is a high chance that a lot of the Baltimore Ravens players don't need to play the full game in order to get the win.
Yeah.
Whereas you look at a game like tonight's game, where the spread is only 3.5 points, all the players on both teams are likely to play all 4 quarters of the match. So that's worth bearing in mind. Look for the close matchups, so the players are going to see a lot of time on the field, a more chance to win your bets.
Well, I think next week, because we're only in week 2 of a 18-week regular season, is it, or 18-week regular season?
18, yeah.
Let's look at the spread market next week, because even though we've done it before, I think it's interesting, because obviously that's a big market in the US. They love their spread betting, don't they? Which is basically winning or losing margins. But let's talk about that next week.
For sure.
I don't know if you've got any more NFL, or if it's just a couple of other any other business points I wanted to flag up.
No, I think that's it. I've got one more little bonus same game parlay. I know you like a little bet builder on those games, because we've got a Super Bowl rematch this weekend between the Chiefs and the Eagles. I've gone for Patrick Mahomes 200 passing yards, Jalen Hurts 30 rushing yards. That's both quarterbacks. And then I've gone for Devonta Smith.
How many of your Mahomes? 200.
200.
All right.
Sounds like a big number for those of you maybe new to the NFL. That's a fairly low number for a player of his caliber. I said Jalen Hurts, 30 rushing yards. He had about 60 in week 1. And then Devonta Smith, Eagles wide receiver, to register 4 receptions. Essentially means 4 catches.
Who's on the reception, sorry?
Devonta Smith.
Devonta, okay.
I can spell it for you if you like, but
no, I know Devonta Smith. Sorry, I just didn't hear what you said. Sorry, I'm plugged into the matrix in terms of the NFL. Just talking about what you say, 200 yards isn't a big number. It's certainly not. What was the stat from the Bills quarterback in the 4th quarter the other night? He threw for.
Josh Allen is the Bills quarterback. He threw for 241 yards in the 4th quarter alone, which was more than 21 other quarterbacks managed in their entire games last week. So
amazing. That was to bring his team back and win it in the 4th quarter, wasn't it?
Amazing game. If any of you watching that haven't checked out the highlights of that yet, go and do it. It'll be 15 minutes well spent.
Okay, good. Well, that's some football and some American football. Just in closing, the Ryder Cup picks have been announced since we were last recording, and I haven't been looking at the market, but I would like to do some Ryder Cup stuff. So let's do that next week, because we're 2 weeks away from the event. I don't know where the market is in terms of Ryder Cup, because I've never really looked at it, and we know we did dabble on some golf, and we had some winners and some losers over the summer, didn't we? But
I think it's Ryder Cup's what a fun one to bet on, but you're not getting obviously the same markets as a normal stroke play tournament. So I think we'll have to look at stuff like top point scorer, Most singles points won, those sort of things. Obviously we're probably going to have a pick on who's going to win it, because they're fairly evenly priced, the US and Europe. But perhaps that's maybe one to we can fire up a little day by day little bet log when that comes around. What's that? Weekend of the 27th, isn't it? So it's a couple.
Yeah, we're 2 weeks away. I think it's not this weekend. It's 2 weekends away. I think one of the things that I'd like to do with this is look at in play, because Ryder Cup golf I think would be a good in play event, wouldn't it? Once you've got matches out on the, winner of next hole, winning margin, that market would be quite fluid, I think, in that. But this is all stuff which hopefully we'll get to, because I know a lot of people, who do sports betting, they're in the in play market, which I don't do a lot of, actually, and you do, I know, because you occasionally will be sat with me watching something and you'll think, oh, I can't believe the odds on that, and suddenly, actually what normally happens is you jump out of your chair because something's just hit, and I'm like, what was that? And he said, oh, I was on that. They're like, oh, thanks for sharing that one, mate.
Yeah.
Anyhow, what are you looking forward to this weekend?
The return of the Albion, of course. I think it's a tough game away at Bournemouth. I'm excited, obviously, again, week 2 of the NFL, some cracking games. I mentioned that Chiefs-Eagles game. That's 9:30 UK time, so I'll likely watch the whole ordeal there. And just having Premier League football back, to be honest. Like you say at the very start, having an international break 3 weeks into the season seems killer, but there's another one in a month. And I'll say that's my birthday weekend as well. We got no Premier League football, so but yeah, exciting, especially after it feels like we've really moved into the autumnal season of sport now. After we had the US Open final last weekend. Alcaraz obviously won fairly easily, but obviously Ryder Cup's come soon. Premier League football's back, and then before you know it, we'll be talking about the Ashes in December.
Yeah, and you can't watch the Bournemouth game because you're playing this weekend, aren't you, yourself? And then the following weekend.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't offer you a bet on that one, but I would take Charlie Kelly to score every day of the week. Maybe we wouldn't get the best price on that. I'm interested to see what odds you give me on that. But
very good. Well, we won't name the opposition just in case they come after you and they see this.
Indeed, yeah.
Okay, well, listen, enjoy your game and up the Albion, and then let's see that's how we go this week. We're due a few wins, so fingers crossed it'll be this weekend.
Absolutely, look forward to it.
Nice one. I'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Take care. Bye.
Incredible!